Great job to those guys. So let me throw a question at you tonight. Have you ever gotten upset about something and you said those famous few words? It's just not fair, right? It's just not fair. Whatever the situation is, whatever is happening, it's just not fair. Like, for example, how many oldest kids do we have in the room tonight? Like, you know good and well you're the practice kid, right? And you know good and well that little brother and little sister is going to get away with more than you do, right? And it's not fair. It goes in the unfair category, and it's just something that we have to live in. Or how about when it gets a little bit more aggravating, when it's like you play sports and you're not on the starting lineup, but you sub in and you do a great job, and the same coach that just puts you in pulls you out like 5 seconds later, and you've actually done a really good job for those 5 seconds. And like, I can get it. Like, if I'm not good, don't put me in. But don't put me in and then pull me just because, right? I mean, that's not fair to me. That's not right what you're doing. And the examples could go on for days and days and days. But of course, there's no way for me to know how unfairness impacts you, like in this moment. We each have our unfair times throughout today. So I just want you to think for just a moment, just in your head, what are some of the areas that feel unfair to you right now? Don't say them, just think. Over today, over this last week, what are some of the areas that have felt unfair to you? And I know that's kind of a downer to dive into this last part of the series for these last few weeks, but sometimes we just get in that attitude that what happens to me is unfair and it's not what I need. So here's the thing, whenever I was going over this and preparing this, like my mind kept going back to Cinderella, right? And like that was just, for some reason, that just kept coming up over and over. And here's how I viewed Cinderella. I hated it as a little boy, right? Partly because of the outlook I had on it, because we all know that Cinderella had it rough with the stepmom and the stepsisters, and then she catches a break and she meets the fairy godmother, but her clock still strikes midnight and she still goes back to the old lifestyle that she used to have. And at that point I was like, you know what, is this really what it's like when I grow up? If I become a good person, is this how life is going to treat me? Because it doesn't seem very fair. Like, it was a sincere issue for me growing up, the way that Cinderella was treated. It wasn't right, and it made me look at life and go, dude, I don't want that, right? Like, I don't want to try so hard to be good and then still be treated this way. Now, for those of us that know how the story ends, it works out, and Cinderella is great in the end, and everything goes how it's supposed to go. And as silly as that is, here's what I think. I think sometimes we take that approach to life. I think we look at life and go, dude, if I even try in this area and it still fails, if there's a possibility that I fail, it's unfair. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play it safe, and I'm never even going to try in the first place. I'm never even going to put any effort in just because the fear of failure is there. And here's what happens. It's like we have two sides of life. We have the fair side of life and we have the unfair side of life. And for so many of us at this age, we spend most of our time in the unfair category. Because everything that happens to us shouldn't happen to us. Right? Everything that goes on in our lives shouldn't happen in our lives. And here's what I mean. We all know somebody. Y'all go to school, maybe you're this person. We all know somebody that like cheats in school. And they like get the A and the teacher never catches it. And they think they're the best thing in the world. And then you work so hard and you're like solid C+. Right? And it's unfair. It goes in that unfair category of things that shouldn't be this way. We all know friends who get busted and parents come down super hard. And we know the same other people that were in that group doing that same thing. Mom and dad didn't care, but you and your friend, you're at the house grounded for a while. Right? Because things were not fair. And here's the thing, I get it, man. I remember being in school with some of those people. And I remember what it was like to see some of the people who were the meanest people in the school. And here's what it looked like where I was. It almost seemed like the meaner you were, the more it paid off. Like, girls, if you had that mean attitude down, you got looked at differently. Right? And it almost seemed like sometimes those folks that acted that way, they were the ones driving the nicest cars and the newest trucks. Those were the ones that teachers went out of their way to say, hey, this is what you should be like. And you're like, oh, I know how they are. And then I knew the same people on the other hand who were good people who just had things tough sometimes. They didn't get a car at all. Right? Or they didn't get it breaks sometimes when situations would occur at school. And they spend a lot of time in that unfair category. They camped out there, and that became who they were. They lived a life that was just unfair. And the longer you live a life inside of the unfair category, the more okay you become with being in that. So I want to throw something up on the screen. It's only going to stay there for a second because we've got another one right after it. But here's a bad life truth for you guys tonight. And it says this: we like it when people get what they deserve, and we don't like it when they do get what they don't deserve. And we're going to dive into some grace, and we're going to dive into some mercy in just a little bit, but this right here is going to be a truth in your life, and it is not good, but it's human nature. Right? It's human nature to feel this way, but here's what gets scary. Whenever we attach that bad life truth to our eyes when it comes to looking at the God we serve. Right? When we begin to look at God in the wrong way, and here's the only problem with that, and we're going to throw it up on the screen for you too. If we want God to be fair with everyone, we may not like that fairness and what it really looks like. We may not like it when God is fair in our minds, and the way that looks, and the way that we think that should look. So over the last few weeks, man, we've been talking about some of the famous words that Jesus said before he was crucified, before he died. And tonight we're going to look at a couple different passages that Jesus said after he was raised back from the death, but before he went to be with God in heaven. So a couple things you need to understand. Jesus had 12 main people he spent his time with. We know them as disciples, right? Great dudes for the most part. One was crazy and betrayed him. But just remember that. 12 guys that spent a lot of time with him. And we can assume from that, like if 12 of us were to spend years with Jesus, physically talking to him, being able to touch him, walking with him, I mean, it would be safe to assume that hopefully we would look a little bit different from other people. Like maybe we would talk like Jesus a little bit more and act like Jesus a little bit more. And these 12 guys, people assume that about them because they hung out with Jesus 24/7. And it's not a bad thing to assume that until you meet one of the disciples named Peter. Peter was a handful. Right? And here's what we know about some of the things about Peter. Peter was the guy in the group that would speak up before anything else, and he never actually thought through what he was about to say. Right? That he was that person that would just say the first thing that came out, and it got him in a lot of trouble. It got him in a lot of bad situations. Peter was the one that would volunteer for things inside of the group and had no idea what he was even talking about or volunteering for. Peter was just that person that would spit off bold statements without thinking it through. And one of those statements happened to be what we're going to look at tonight. And it's right before Jesus is arrested. And Jesus was straight up with his disciples. He said, all this stuff is about to happen. We looked at that a few weeks ago, right? When they're having the Lord's Supper, the Last Supper, in the upper room. Jesus said, some of you guys, you're going to turn your backs on me. You're not going to stay with me through all of this. And Peter opens his mouth. Peter's about to say something. So look at Matthew 26, verses 33 through 35 with me real quick. So Jesus has just told him this, and this is what Peter says. Peter answered him, though they, talking about the disciples, though they all fall away because of you, I will never fail you and fall from you. Jesus answered and said to him, truly I tell you, this very night before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And Peter said to him, even if I must die with you, I will not deny you. Here's the deal with this. This is probably the most bold statement Peter ever made in his entire life. It was a statement that said, no matter what you're telling me, as God on earth in human form knows everything, no matter what you're saying, Jesus, I want you to understand that I am willing to face torture and I am willing to go to death with you because of you. And then just a few hours after Jesus' arrest, Peter comes across this exact situation, and Peter was questioned by a group of people, and they said, hey, don't you know him? And Peter goes, I don't know anything about him. I don't know anything about who he is. I never spent any time with him. You've got me confused. You've got all this stuff wrong. I have no idea who this guy is. Just hours after Peter makes one of the most bold statements by any disciple in our Bible. And Peter fails. Peter fails. Huge betrayal right here by someone who spent years with Jesus Christ, by someone who spent years being in the presence of Jesus. Physically, he has opened his mouth and now he has failed. But here's what I want us to do. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of Peter for just a moment. And I want you to be honest with yourself. Have you ever been in that situation to where you get caught like red-handed betraying one of your friends, or like gossiping about one of your friends, or saying something about someone else you shouldn't have. You know that feeling of like embarrassment that you get? And that feeling of like, oh my gosh, like I just said that and other people heard it, and the friend I was talking about, they caught me. Like, there's no way out of this, right? Like, we've all been in that situation to some degree. That's the spot that Peter is in right here. That's the situation that Peter is in. And Peter swore he would never turn his back on Jesus, and now he has done the one thing that he said he would never do. So let me ask you this. What would be fair? If we're going to talk about fair and unfair, what would be a fair response from Jesus to Peter because of what he did? I mean, would it be anger? Would it be disappointment? Would it be, and I'm just going to rain my wrath down on you? You spent years with me, and now you just turned your back on me? What do you think would be a fair response? And here's what I want us to do. I want us to look at what Jesus said. So I want you to turn to John 21, verse 15 with me real quick. And it says this. When they had finished breakfast, this is after Jesus has been raised from the dead, okay? When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, let's just pause, time out moment right here, and understand what's happened. Peter has already denied Jesus. Jesus has already been crucified. He's been put in the ground. We've looked at that over the last few weeks. He is back. And just so we all understand, Peter is still at the table with Jesus. Jesus didn't rain down anger on him. Jesus didn't come and just beat him up because of what he had done. Here's what happens. So many times, so many of us, when we mess up, when we sin, when we betray Jesus in that way, we think, for some reason, that Jesus is going to respond to us the way we would expect someone else to respond to us. Because I got news for you tonight, man. If you're talking about me, or I hear you saying something about me, I'm not going to be just totally cool with you for a little bit, right? We're going to need just a little bit of time to let some things calm down. We're going to need to let some things go and just cool off for just a minute. Because you don't deserve me in my presence in that moment. Does that make sense? And that's how we look at him, not Jesus. Jesus says, no, you are right here. You are included. You are right where I want you to be, and then something amazing happens. And then Jesus goes from just having breakfast with Peter in the room to actually talking to Peter. And if I'm Peter, I mean, this is my oh no moment, right? Because up until this point, like, Jesus could have just overlooked him. Jesus could have just not known he was there. He could have just been ignoring him. But at this point in history, in Scripture, Jesus says something to Peter. And look at what he says real quick. He said, when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. He said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, tend my sheep. And then I want you to look at this. He said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him a third time, do you love me? And he said to Jesus, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. What in the world? Like, this makes no sense, and it's one of the weirdest conversations in our Bible, but I don't want you to miss this, okay? We need to connect these dots. Throughout all of Jesus' ministry, Jesus was referred to by others and referred to himself as what we call the Good Shepherd, right? So if he is a shepherd, then naturally the people that follow the shepherd, or the things that follow the shepherd, are going to be known as sheep. So understand the language that Jesus is using right here. Jesus is saying that he is the good shepherd, that everybody, including us that follow him, in Bible words, are sheep. Right? We follow the leader. We follow Jesus Christ. And here's what Jesus is saying to Peter right here. He's saying, Peter, we're okay. Me and you were good. We're right where we need to be. I knew this was going to happen. I knew this was going to take place. And not only are we good, but I even want you to go out and I want you to represent me to the entire world. And I want you to love the people that follow me. I want you to take care of them. I want you to be there for them. And instead of being angry about Peter's betrayal, Jesus responded with love. Right? Jesus responded with compassion. And instead of kicking him out of the disciple group and the disciple club, Jesus promoted Peter. He promoted him to a warrior. He promoted him to the leader after Jesus leaves. He's like, Peter, you've got it. And honestly, look, here's the thing. If I'm in Peter's shoes, I probably feel like there's some sort of punishment that I need. Right? And I think so many times me and you get caught up there. Because here's what we do. We sin, we mess up, we go to God, and God says, man, I've got you. You are forgiven because you belong to me. And then we go, God, that can't be that simple. It can't be that easy. Where's my punishment? Just give it to me. Don't make me wait for it. Don't make me search for it. Just give me this. I'll pay whatever price. And I want you to look at the screen for me real quick. Jesus was unfair to Peter in the best way possible. Totally unfair what he did to Peter. He gave him love instead of anger, instead of wrath. Jesus forgave him. No strings attached right here. Peter didn't have to do anything except hold on to what Jesus had given him. Jesus gave Peter exactly what he didn't deserve. We call it grace. Right? We call it grace today. That is what we know that as. And Jesus is saying to Peter, I know what you did. I know you denied me. I know what you have done, but I love you, and now I want you to go, and I want you to love everybody else that loves me. I want you to love and take care of everybody else that follows me. It wasn't what Peter deserved. It wasn't what was fair in that day and in that time, or even today, but it was better than that. It was grace. It was the love of Jesus Christ. And if I can just be completely honest with you tonight, it's the same with us. It's the same with me and you. God's reaction to us when we mess up is not to come down and drop the hammer on us. God's reaction to us is love. And we know that because of the cross. We know that because of Jesus' dying for us. And I want you to look at the screen one more time. And I want you to really understand this tonight. God's grace is unfairly good to you. And it'll always be that. It will always be unfairly good. Does that mean that our sin doesn't matter? No. Does that mean that there is somehow something that Jesus looks at us and goes, oh my gosh, they just sinned, and we're just going to overlook that. Let's just paint over it, slip it under the rug. No, there's consequences to our sins. We look all through Scripture and we know that sin kills, and sin has lifelong consequences that goes along with it. But the consequences of those sins is not the representations of God's love for us while we're going through those. Does that make sense? Just because we have to deal with the consequences doesn't mean we are loved any less or liked any less by the God that died for us. He has gone to extraordinary lengths to show us that He's never going to leave us. To show us that He's always going to be there, that His love is going to rule over all of it. He never kicked Peter out. He never tossed Peter to the side, but He showed him grace. If Jesus had been fair with Peter, he would have been gone a long time ago. But how good is it to know that when it comes to our consequences and to our punishment, whenever we sin, God is not fair. God is unfair in the best of ways for us. And He loves you, right? He loves to take care of you. And here's what's truth for you guys tonight. When we follow Jesus, we're going to mess up. It's going to happen. It's who we are. It's how we were put together. It's what we do the moment sin entered the picture. And for some reason, we think because I'm going to mess up on an everyday basis, I must have to separate myself from Jesus because He can't be happy with me. So I'm going to pull back. And I'm going to distance myself. And I'm going to back away. And I'm going to take almost like a timeout in my faith life until I don't think Jesus is upset anymore. And maybe that's why, stay with this now, maybe that is why some of you don't come to church as much as you used to. Maybe that's why some of you don't speak up and give the wisdom and the knowledge that Jesus has given to you. Maybe that's why you don't use that in small groups as much as you used to. Maybe that's why you do good just to show up and not bring anyone with you because you're just barely dragging yourself here because all you're focused on is the sin that you have done. And I'm not saying that you've taken a break from your faith, but I'm saying for some reason in our minds and in our hearts, we view our mess up and God's judgment on the same level, and it is not. He judges in a way that we cannot understand and we cannot comprehend. And whenever He looks at your sin and He looks at your mess ups, He sees Jesus. So we don't have to think that we just no longer qualify to be a child of God or that we no longer qualify to be a Christian. So here's what I want to leave you with tonight. Our God is better than that. And here's what that means. God has more in mind. God has more planned for you as one of His children than simply having to always be afraid, live in fear that God is no longer going to love you just because you mess up. when Jesus died for you on that cross, he was fully aware of what he was dying for. He was fully aware that each of us were going to wake up every single day and struggle. And it is because of that reason that he chose to do what he did. It's because he knew we needed that unfair love. It's because he knew we needed that unfair grace that he did what we did. And here's what I want to leave you with. And as we head into this next song in just a moment, I want you guys to just imagine with me, just eyes closed for just a moment. I want you to imagine in your mind Jesus looking over your life. And I want you to just take a moment and I want you to imagine, as a human that sins, I want you to imagine how you think Jesus responds to your sin. Just think about how he would look every time you mess up. Think about the things he would say. Would he be angry? Would he be disappointed? Would he abandon you? Would he just walk out and leave you? And here's what I want you to understand tonight. I want you to understand that I want to help you replace those lies from Satan with the truth about who our Jesus is. And that truth is the fact that he loves you through the sin that you were dealing with. He loves you in the process of it. He loves you in the middle of it, and he will never leave you. And I want to ask you tonight to do something very special in just a moment. I want to ask you tonight that whenever this song begins to play, I want to ask that tonight we come to this altar, and instead of just saying, God, this is what I need, this is what I need, I simply want us to come down here with happy, open hearts. And I want us to say, Jesus, thank you for my forgiveness. Thank you for loving me in the process of me being a sinner. Thank you for never leaving me. Thank you for never abandoning me. Thank you for never walking out. Simply thank him for his unfair love for you and his unfair grace and his unfair judgment. Thank him for the gifts that you've received. If you guys would please stand, the altar's going to be open for you, okay?